Military Broadcast Radio, the station that's giving veterans a voice.
Find us on the web at mbradio.us.
This entire military is one cohesive, dedicated force. And the threats to our nations, they don't sleep. They're watching our every move. Iran, Russia, China, North Korea, ISIS, Al-Qaeda. They may be watching this right now. Our military should not be mistaken for a cable news gabfest show. We don't care what you look like. We don't care who you voted for, who you worship, what you worship, who you love. It doesn't matter if your dad left you millions when he died or if you knew who your father was. We have been honed into a machine of lethal moving parts that you would be wise to avoid if you know what's good for you. We will not be intimidated. We will not back down. We've seen war. We don't want war. But if you want war with the United States of America, there's one thing I can promise you, so help me God. Someone else will raise your sons and daughters.
Military Broadcast Radio, the station that's giving veterans a voice.
Find us on the web at mbradio.us.
Opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent.
Find us on the web at mbradio.us.
Join Terry with Tracer Rounds every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern to hear interviews with veteran artists, veteran business owners, and businesses that support veterans. Catch us on Roku, Amazon Fire TV, and MB Radio. If you miss a show, you can listen again on Reefs Across America Radio every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern. Tune in to see if you are on target. MBR, giving veterans a voice.
And welcome back to the Tracer Rounds podcast. I'm Terry, your host, and you're on Military Broadcast Radio, where we're giving veterans a voice. And tonight's voice is to Jeremy Stalnecker, who is a Marine veteran. Welcome, Jeremy.
Well, thank you. It's good to be with you.
I am so excited to have you on the show. I've been reading up on you, and I have to tell you, you have quite a legacy and quite a your trajectory from where you were to where you are now is quite impressive. And so can you tell us a little bit about you joining the Marine Corps and when you joined and why, and maybe some of the highlights of your career, if you don't mind?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. It has been it's been a strange journey. I'll say that. I don't know if it's been it's been a great one, but it's been a strange one. Yeah, so I was raised in a home that no one in my family really served. My grandfather served in World War II when he was very young, but it was something he kind of did, and it happened, and everyone knew it happened, but it wasn't a part of really his story. He didn't talk much about it, and so I wasn't raised around the military, but I was raised around people, not in my family, but kind of outside of my family who had served. And my dad was very patriotic, and anytime he could get me near someone who had served in the military, he would. And I grew up in a kind of a senior kind of retirement area in Southern California. And so there were a lot of folks who had served, some in World War II and, Vietnam and other wars, and at other times. And if my dad ran into them, he'd find some excuse to have me sit down and have lunch with them or something. So growing up, I heard all these amazing stories, and I just started to think about and understand that it was possible to be a part of something bigger than yourself and serve in these places and be a part of some of these stories that I had heard. And so at a very young age, I remember telling my dad I would really like to be in the military. Interestingly, and I joke about this, but it's kind of true. I didn't really realize growing up that there was more than one branch of the military. I thought, like, if you're in the military, you're a Marine. That's what you do, right? Everybody in the military is a Marine. And so I kind of knew, but I didn't know anyone who'd served in anything else. And so I remember telling my dad when I was a teenager, I really felt like God wanted me to be in the Marine Corps. And he said, well, I'm not sure that's God, but we'll do what we have to help you get to where you think you need to go. And so I did. It was important to my parents that I go to college before I do anything else. So I went to college. A family friend who was a Marine said there are some great commissioning programs. If you're going to college, you might as well go through a commissioning program. And so that's what happened. I went to officer candidate school in 1996, and I was commissioned shortly thereafter as a second lieutenant in the United States Marine Corps. Again, just like I didn't know there were other branches of the military, I also thought that if you were a Marine, you had to go into the infantry. I didn't know that they did other things in the Marine Corps. And so my whole life, I mean, I figured this out later, but when I was young, I thought, well, you go in the Marine Corps, you're an infantry guy, that's what you do. And so that was my dream. And man, it's a long process to get there, but thankfully, I ended up being an infantry officer. Served with 1st Battalion, 5th Marines, based out of Camp Pendleton. And for me, that was, in a lot of ways, it was the fulfillment of, my lifelong dream from the time I was a kid. That's all I had wanted to do. Served with 1-5 with 1st Battalion, 5th Marines, did a number of deployments, just kind of peacetime, not kind of, they were peacetime deployments prior to 9/11. Yeah. And then 9/11 happened. I was actually on the rifle range when we got word that the towers had been hit. And everything changed. As you know, as anyone who served during that time knows, the whole world changed, certainly. Yeah. But in the military, everything changed. The way that we trained, the things that we did, the things we were concerned about, the things we didn't care about anymore, all of it changed overnight. And we started to get ready for what would happen. And for us, for the 1st Marine Division and 1st Battalion, 5th Marines, what happened was we went to Kuwait in January of 2003. And then March 19th and 20th of 2003, 1-5 was the Marine Infantry Battalion that went into Iraq and secured the southern objective on the border, kind of the center axis of advance into the country. First KIA of the war, Lieutenant Shane Childers, is one of our Marines. And every time I have the opportunity to talk about him and say his name and remember him, I try to do that. But that all happened. We made our way to Baghdad. Once we got to Baghdad, the Battle of Baghdad on April 10th was our battalion. And so crazy time, a lot happened there. And just as chaotic as that was, it almost as quickly came to an end. And we stayed in Baghdad for a couple of weeks. We retrograded back over the course of another month and eventually came back to California. I had already made the decision to get out of the Marine Corps. And so after all of that, after doing the thing I had dreamed about my entire life and the thing I'd always wanted to do, leading Marines in combat, I came home and 30 days later, I was out of the Marine Corps, off active duty, and trying to figure out what the next phase of life was about. So yeah, interesting time for sure.
So how was it coming out of that environment and then redeploying and then being a civilian out of uniform in California? What did that look like? Did you struggle with that at all, or was that an easy transition for you?
Yeah, it was terrible. So it's interesting when I talk about this because I transitioned into, it wasn't really a career field, but I went into ministry. So I started to work at a church. It was the church that my family and I had been a part of. I don't have a seminary or a Bible background or degree, but there were a lot of things going on at the church. There were building projects and all kinds of stuff happening. And so my pastor at the time said, if you ever want to get out of the Marine Corps, you have a job here. I need leadership, and you can handle kind of oversight of these projects and doing some of these things. And so at the time, my wife and I had been married a couple of years. We had 2 small children, and it just seemed like the right time and the right thing to do. Really made the decision actually prior to even deploying to Iraq. So I was already headed that direction. And I thought, and I think everyone thought, that would be an easy transition. You're in a great community of people that love you and care about you. It's a job that you care about. But in 2003, no one was talking about, certainly not post-traumatic stress or combat trauma or any of these issues that we talk about now. Right. But also, and probably, even bigger in my situation, no one was talking about transition. We had a class that you were supposed to attend when you were getting out of the military, out of the Marine Corps. I remember showing up to that class probably 2 weeks before I checked out. And the staff NCO that was running is like, hey, sir, You don't need to stay for this. Just bring me your paperwork. I'll sign it off and you can just go. You don't need to be here. That was 2003. Again, we weren't talking about any of these issues, nothing. It was just kind of like, just go through the thing and get people out. And so I was happy about it, right? I was in the class. I got my paperwork signed. I did my thing. It was literally walking away. I was in the Marine Corps. I went home. I took my uniform off. The next day, I didn't put it back on. And I went to work at the church and found myself in, and this is a very common story, but found myself in a world, an environment that I didn't really understand, around people that I didn't really understand or at the time respect. I felt like they didn't know who I was and what I had done and what I had been a part of. I mean, literally, 30 or 45 days earlier, I had been in combat in Iraq, and now I'm at home trying to get volunteers to do their stuff and dealing with people that had no context at all for my, for what I had been through. And I quickly became very frustrated. Frustration led to anger. And then I took that out on everyone in my life, my wife and kids. My wife would do her best just to keep herself and the kids away from me because I was so angry when I was at home. At work, at the church, I was not much better, caused a lot of problems to the point that eventually my pastor, who had been my pastor for a long time and I knew cared about me, called me into his office and said, this isn't working. You're out of control. I don't know what the problem is, but you can't be here anymore. Again, people weren't having these conversations. And so it wasn't maybe there's a problem transitioning home or because of what you did. It was, you have a problem and you are the problem and you need to figure out what that is. And in that process, I really did believe that there was something wrong with me, that I was somehow broken, that there was something, this wasn't a military problem. This was a Jeremy problem. And I thought, a lot of these thoughts, the world would be better off without me. My family would certainly be better off without me. I don't know how to get control of how I'm feeling and things that are going on. I constantly looked back to the Marine Corps. I need to go back there. That's something I understand. That's something that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
My unit, the unit that I was a part of, deployed back to Iraq about 7 months after we had come home. The first Battle of Fallujah they were part of. And so all of that was happening and I'm sitting at home hearing about it. And it created a really dangerous and terrible environment for myself and for everyone around me. And so it was about a year of dealing with that, people kind of just staying away from me, before some of those same people got in front of me and said, there's a problem, and really confronted me on a lot of what I was doing and how I was behaving. And, people like my dad, my pastor, other people who I knew cared about me. These weren't just kind of outsiders. These were people I knew cared about me, and confronted me on that and helped me start to make progress and start to move forward. But yeah, really difficult time. And, if my wife was sitting here, she would say it took us about 10 years as a couple to really get on the right, get on the same page and start to really figure out what we were supposed to be doing. So it took a long time, but it was in that first year that things started to move the direction they were supposed to.
So how did you figure out that it was service connected and it wasn't just a you problem? Because yes, we all have attitudes and sometimes we are in our own way and we are the problem.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's not really that we're the problem. Our situation and our mind, what our mind is telling us is the problem. And it's something a lot of times out of our own control. So how did you, besides them just telling you, hey, look, there's something going on here, you need some help. How did you get that help, or how did you know to get that help, or where did you go to get the help?
So even through all of that, and even as people, came to me that cared about me and said, this is not who you are. This is not who we've known you to be. This is, there's a problem and you need to get this figured out, because that was kind of the advice. Most people didn't know what to say. They just knew they needed to say something. So it's like, you need to figure this out. And if we can help you, we'll help you, but you need to figure this out. And so, people talk about the stigma around getting care for these things, and even around issues related to the VA, and that, again, people now that have only served now don't know, I guess, or remember what it was like. I mean, in 2003, again, this is,
Yeah.
you talk about stigma, and no one's talking about any of this. You don't go to counselors, you don't admit that you're struggling. And I really did believe this was fairly unique to me. And so even through that process, I was in a church community, again, around people that helped me and loved me. And so I was able to realize, first of all, it's not everyone else. I mean, they shouldn't understand where I'm coming from, but they're not the problem. I'm the problem, right? My behavior, although there may be a reason, there's not an excuse. So there may be reasons I'm feeling this way, but that doesn't excuse me from treating people in my life the way that I have. And so I just started working on that and figuring out what I needed to do to move forward and to deal with those things. But I didn't connect that to what I had done in the military or even transition. I just thought, man, I don't know what happened, but something happened and I've got to get this back together.
Yeah.
And so a big part of that for me was not staying connected to people I served with. It was early enough, Facebook and all that stuff. It wasn't a thing. And so I was able to just literally stop answering the phone, and I didn't have to stay connected to anyone I served with. And that helped me in a way. I don't think it was ultimately healthy, but in a way it helped me to just start looking forward and stop looking back, which is something I was really struggling with. I just kept looking over my shoulder, kept looking back, kept saying it was better back there, right? And so I didn't connect this to anything that I had done for about 10 years. I was struggling. My wife and I were struggling. We were trying to figure things out, talking to people we knew could help us, fighting through things. And it just wasn't great, but we were kind of limping along and making some progress. About 10 years after I came home from Iraq, a group of Marines that I had served with were getting together they called it a reunion, but there were only about 10 of us. And it was at a place in Colorado. And one of them reached out to me and said, "Hey, we're doing this thing. Would you be interested in coming and hanging out with us for a couple of days?" And I had not talked to anyone. I hadn't seen anyone. I had no idea what anyone was up to. And so I thought, yeah, maybe that's something that would be good. It's funny, a few people I talked to at the time were like, yeah, maybe you shouldn't do that. Maybe that's something you should stay away from. It's kind of funny now looking back on it. But so I sat down with those guys and we did some stuff. It was up in the mountains. And so it was cool. We did hiking and, all the stuff you do in the mountains. And then I remember one night sitting around a fire with those guys, and they had stayed connected. Some of them had stayed in and gone to Fallujah and some other places. And so I started to hear stories from them about Marines that I knew who had come home and taken their lives, who had wrecked their families, some who came home and were just trying to get by. They weren't doing anything super meaningful, but they were just trying to survive. And that was the first time it ever even dawned on me that this was a bigger problem than just me. It's like the light went on and I realized, wow, this is something a lot of people are dealing with.
Right.
And in the process of that, realized the difference between them and me is that I had the community of people around me that could help me get up and move forward. And a lot of these guys didn't have that. And so that led to a lot of the work that we do now. But yeah, it was not something, I'm not a smart guy, right? Again, I was a Marine. I'm not a smart guy. But I didn't put the pieces together like this. Maybe this is somehow connected to something that happened in the military. I just thought there was something wrong with me, and I can't look back or it's going to stir up all this stuff again. And I just need to figure out how to grind it out and keep moving forward. And hopefully it all works out somehow. But when I realized that I wasn't alone and that other people were also struggling in a way that relieved a lot of pressure.
Right.
And then it caused me to step back and go, okay, there is a problem. Let's figure out what the real problem is and figure out how to navigate that going forward.
It does take some of that looking back to go forward, I think. So just distancing
Mm,
yourself from the past isn't necessarily a good idea. I mean it is to some degree depending
right.
upon what you experience, but you have to look back to go forward because you have to see where you've been in order to know where you want to head and to know the challenges that you were facing behind you.
Yeah.
You don't want them in front of
Yeah.
you again. So you need to kind of, I think you have to, so I think connecting with those service members that you had served with was a good idea because really it connected the dots for you. And you're like, that is what's going on with me. That is what's
Yeah.
happening here
Yeah.
when people weren't talking about it. So I think you were your own, um, you made your own solution basically by going
Mm,
back and hearing stories. And then you're able to then go, okay, and process it all.
yeah. Yeah, and and I talk about this sometimes now. Is it's not good to stay, as you mentioned, stuck in the past, right? And a lot of veterans, their whole identity is so wrapped up in their service that they never move past that. They never grow beyond their service. And I may be going out on a limb here, but I think that's why some organizations like VFWs and those things, they can be very helpful, but they can also be a place where people that are unable because they're not equipped or whatever the case, they're not able to move forward. And so they just keep kind of going back to what they know and they just hang on to that identity. And that's probably a terrible example, but that can be very helpful to have those communities of people. But as a source of pride, as a source of input, as a source of people who get you that can talk to you, but the goal has to be to move forward. And I think so many in our
Yes.
community are comfortable with what they did and 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 unwilling to move past that. So yes, look back to be informed about how to move forward,
Yes.
but you've got to be
Absolutely.
forward facing or you're going to get stuck.
Yes, I 100% agree with that. That is good advice. So, after you kind of figured out what was going on and you started working on relationships and trying to get yourself back in a good place, in a good headspace, then
Yeah.
what did you do from there? Because didn't you take on a pastor of a church yourself too, after that?
Yeah. Yeah. So, here's advice to anyone who's struggling after combat. Don't become a marriage counselor and don't become a pastor because those are the two things I did. And it was wild. So it's funny. Again, I don't have a seminary degree. So, I always tell people I can read, so I know how to learn. But um, I went to work at that church. And at the time, my wife and I had been married for a few years. I was 26, I think. So we were pretty young. We had only been married for a few years, but I was the only guy on the church staff that had been in the military. So I was given the dubious, if you will, responsibility of counseling the young military couples. So my marriage is falling apart, and I am trying to offer good, strong counseling advice to these couples who are also struggling, right? And so,
Right.
not super healthy. Um, Started to get things figured out, started to move forward just while I was there. And I served at that church for 5 years. So that was, even 5 years before I had this conversation with these Marines.
Oh, wow.
But I was healthy enough to continue doing what I was supposed to do in ministry. And I became a pastor during that time. So I had been pastoring a church. I was a senior pastor of a small church in Northern California for almost 5 years before I sat down with those guys and had that conversation.
Oh,
And
wow.
you don't know what people are going through. My wife and I, we're doing fine in terms of how we presented ourselves to the rest of the world. And it wasn't like there was physical abuse or anything like that going on. We were just in different places. We didn't see the world the same way. We were struggling to, we were raising kids, but we certainly were not on the same page, moving in the same direction, but we had kind of a common goal as I was pastoring the church and trying to help other people. And so that kept us together, kept us going.
Yeah.
Um, faith has always been something that's been very important to me. I'm a Christian. I became a Christian, pretty young. My dad was a pastor. I was raised in a Christian home. And were it not for faith and an understanding of God and God's plan and those kind of things, I wouldn't have made it at all, I don't think. Um, and so I stayed focused on that, and I believe that God had a plan, and I believe that God, could provide healing and direction, and I believed that and moved toward that. But the missing piece was understanding that the things that had happened, back here 10 years earlier, whatever the case, really did impact me. And so that was the reason. And I needed to address that. I needed to address those things that we had seen and been through, and even the transition. I needed to understand how to get clarity around identity. This is a huge piece. This is something that I talk about all the time. But the military, the Marine Corps was amazing. It was something I'm very proud of, but it was a job. It's not who I am. It didn't make me more or less who I am. And I needed to find my identity in, again, as a Christian, I would say in God and in his plan for me. And so that changed everything. It was like I had all the pieces, but I was missing one. And when the missing piece kind of came into play, where I realized then everything else was able to align, and I could see it. It's almost, for those that have been on a range at night, man, if the illume is not good, you can shoot and try to hit that target, but you can't always see it. And I felt like I was shooting the right direction. I had the right intent. I just didn't exactly know where the target was. And it was having that conversation with those guys, and then a lot of things that happened after that brought that target into focus. And I was able to actually, start making meaningful change and moving forward in the right way.
So after you pastored, then a job opening came up, and it's with Mighty Oaks Foundation, and you became the CEO of Mighty Oaks. Can you tell us about that and how you transitioned from being a pastor to this role?
Yeah. So, it wasn't exactly that clean. It was like everything else in my life. It's been complicated. So one of the guys that I met, so I met with those Marines that I knew that I had served with, but that meeting or whatever was facilitated by another guy, former Marine named Chad Robichaux, and he and his family, he had served in the Marine Corps, and he had transition issues and wanted to help other people. And so had started the Mighty Oaks Foundation, was trying to get it figured out and get it going. And we met during that week that I was there, and he said, man, I'm doing this thing, explained to me what it was. I want to help veterans who are coming home from combat. So specifically combat veterans. I want to help them know how to get the help that we need. And I want to do that. I'm just not exactly sure how to structure something like that. What does that look like? And, there needs to be curriculum and all the kind of things. Right. And I had a background in that. And so he said, would you help me, build this out? And I said, sure. So I was pastoring the church. And then about once a month, we would do a program. Mighty Oaks Foundation still today. We work with veterans, service members, now first responders, for the last 5 years, first responders, and spouses. And what we do is really simple. We have 5-day programs. It's very similar to the format from the beginning. 5-day programs where we bring either men or women. They're separate programs, essentially the same process, but men's or women's programs. And we talk about trauma. We talk about all these issues that no one talked to me about, and address those, but address them from not a clinical perspective, but from a faith perspective. And so we built that out. This was in 2012. So built that out. And then once a month, while I was still pastoring the church, we'd go and do one of those programs. And it was one of those, we'll do the best we can to help people that we know and people that we've served with. And, eventually we'll stop, right? And people will be helped, and we'll stop. The war will end and it'll be over. And that's not what happened. Right. We got to the point where we were doing a program a month and then more. And so I got to the point where I was pastoring a church and, basically volunteer leading Mighty Oaks, and had to make a decision. So in 2015, I left the church and took a full-time position at Mighty Oaks. There were only 2 of us on staff. but took a full-time position there. And over the years, it's grown. This last year, we had over 1,000 people come through the program. We've had nearly 8,000 who have come through the program over time. And so, we have a large staff now and locations across the country and all of that. But it really just grew organically to the point that I needed to make a decision, and made the decision that that's where we needed to be. And so we've been doing that since then. But it's been wild. It's been a wild journey for sure.
So you said there's multiple locations across the country. So how many are there, and how do you plug into the Mighty Oaks if you're a combat veteran or a first responder that's needing to get some, some help, some peer-to-peer coaching and guidance?
Yeah, it's good. So we have locations in California, Texas, Ohio, and Virginia. And we've been blessed with some great relationships. So each one of those, you can kind of think about them. Some are ranches, conference center, that style of location. So they're not, medical or anything. They're places that are beautiful in great settings that people can come, and it's a very peaceful environment to deal with the things that we deal with. And for those who have served or are serving, all they need to do is apply on our website. We have the opportunity, or we give the opportunity to anyone who has served in the military, veteran, active duty service member, or is a first responder or has been a first responder. They can apply on our website, and we'll do our best to get them in. We don't charge anything for the program. We have incredible donors who continue to give to make what we do possible. So we don't charge for the program, and we also don't charge for travel to get to the program. So one of the questions that people ask is, if I live in, Virginia, and I need to go to a program that's happening in Ohio, can I do that? Absolutely. And we'll make sure that we cover all the costs and do the logistics and planning to make sure that happens for you. This year, we have 43, I think, weeks of programs happening. So when someone applies, they apply to the program, they go to our website, they apply to the program. Our applications team will get back to them, talk through kind of where they are and what they're dealing with, and then find a time. So we have almost every week we have a program going on somewhere. Find a time that works in the schedule of the person who applied. Work and children and all the rest can dictate a schedule. And so we'll figure out what time of the year works best for you, and then we'll get you to where you need to go to make that happen. Veterans, I mentioned this, but veterans, active duty service members, first responders, but also spouses. So one of the things that makes us a little bit unique is that we include spouses, those who are married to veterans, first responders, service members, in our regular programming. And we know how important it is to support those who are, supporting the folks who served. And so we would invite them along as well. One of the interesting things that happened. So I mentioned, we thought, well, the war will end and we'll just shut down what we're doing. We'll help everybody we can help and move on. But the demand for what we do has increased. We have a pretty large waiting list. We're figuring out right now, walking through the process now of trying to figure out how do we scale and reach more people, because there are more that need to be reached. Wow. But we're working through that. And so there's always something going on.
So as part of the program, do you offer any kind of drug or alcohol counseling or support there if someone is having trouble with that, is struggling with that? Because a lot of people self-soothe and they use alcohol, or they use some kind of maybe pain medication or something, and that's the way they deal with it. Do you offer that too as part of that program?
Yeah, so I'll talk about the program, what we do, and then how we address those things as well. So we are, again, a little bit unique in that we're not a clinical program, and we're a faith-based program, so we're not a clinical program, which means a couple of things. One means it means that we don't do clinical therapeutical interventions or anything like that. We don't prescribe medication. We don't have therapists or psychologists, psychiatrists on our staff. When someone comes to our program, again, it's 5 days long, so not very long. When someone comes to the program, the people who are leading, so our team leaders, the people who are leading the program that week, they're teaching, they're leading small groups, breakouts, conversations. They have all been to our program. They've all attended as a student. Once, we identify they'd be great to come back and teach. We bring them through a long process of training and equipping them to get up and teach. But what it does is it creates a peer-to-peer environment. So the people leading the program have a similar background to the people sitting in the room. Right. Everyone who's there has served, is serving, or was married to someone who served. And so everyone there has a similar background, speaks a similar language, and the people who are teaching approach it very much from a peer-to-peer standpoint. And so they talk about their own stories. We require that. If you're going to teach in our program, you have to tell your own story, the good, the bad. Talk through what happened and where you were and how you've moved forward and some of the struggles that you've had. Again, that helps to give hope to those students who are trying to figure things out. And so it being non-clinical, again, faith-based, meaning we believe that God has a plan and we want to help you establish a faith foundation. Now, people come from all over the faith spectrum. Some believe in God, some don't, some whatever. Every different opinion you can possibly imagine, but that's fine. Come and hear what we have to say and make decisions for yourself. But we want to help establish a faith foundation. And since we're not a clinical program, a lot of folks with clearances they're afraid to lose, or jobs that would be impacted if they're getting help for post-traumatic stress, they can come to us and get help. And that's not reported back to their command or to their department if they're a first responder. And so it's opened up the door for a lot of people to get help that they would not otherwise get help. And so that's been great. Over that 5 days, we really work to give people hope, to help them understand that they can move forward wherever they are, whatever mess they happen to be standing in, they can move forward. As you mentioned, a lot of people on the other side of trauma and even transition issues will self-medicate. So often the problems are not the problem. The problem are the decisions that were made after the problem. And so that has to be addressed. And that's not something we can necessarily deal with during that 5 days. So what we do after someone's been with us for 5 days, they go home, but they're plugged into our aftercare program. And we have an aftercare staff that works with every single graduate intentionally for 6 months to help them get to the other resources they need. If they need counseling, we connect them to counselors that offer their services to our graduates at no cost. We have drug and alcohol programs that we're connected to that are either no or low cost, depends on the program, but we can connect them to the right places there. Whatever other resources they need to kind of walk out the decisions they made during that week, will help them with that. And so 5 days isn't very long, doesn't sound like it's very long, but it really is a long process. The 5 days is a starting point, and then we'll help you get whatever other help that you need on the other side of that. And so, we, over time, and we've been doing this long enough now that we have a very extensive network of people, and there's some wonderful people in our country. Yes. People who want to help, they just don't exactly know where to help, right? And so we've been able to develop a great network of folks over the last 15 years who want to help and offer their services, whatever those are, at no cost to our graduates. And so we make those connections, and it's been pretty amazing to see.
And you said you've run about 8,000 people through the program?
Yeah, almost 8,000 people through that 5-day program, which is a lot. But then on the other side of it, so that's what we call recovery. This is how we differentiate it, but that's recoveries. But on the resiliency side, we speak to thousands of folks every year, more than 10,000 people a year. Typically, we'll talk to, whether it's at active duty commands or conferences or police departments, fire departments, other places. We'll go in and we call it resiliency training, but it's really just sharing our journeys with folks that have served, are serving, and helping them to learn how to move forward before the bottom falls out. And that's kind of the goal there. So we try to work both sides of that. We always say that our resiliency program is trying to put our recovery program out of business. If we can get to them before they have a problem, then they won't come to the other program. Hasn't happened yet. I don't think it's going to. But we've had a lot of great open doors.
That's awesome. And so you've written several books too. And so Can you tell us a little bit about your books and then
Yeah.
how you're trying to use those to impact the veteran and first responder community as well?
Yeah, I've written a number of books, but three in particular that I'll talk about and that are available. If you go to our website, mightyoaksprograms.org, that's where you can apply and learn more about us. But on the website, there's a place to download digital copies of these three books that I'll talk to you about. And we wrote these with the intent of just providing resources that can be a help to people that are struggling. And what we know is that a lot of people who need help aren't going to start by going to a program like ours. They'll look for other ways to get help. Often it's kind of counterintuitive, but often the people who need help the most are the last ones who will sign up for a program or go to where they can get help. And so we've written these books. One of them is called The Path to Resiliency, and it's 10,000 words. It's a very small book. You can probably read it, most people, in 1 or 2 sittings. And it just talks about what it means to be resilient, what it means to be able to get knocked down and get back up and keep moving forward, and those principles that you need to understand, those things you need to put in your life to be a resilient person. So that book is on there for free download. We wrote a book a couple of years ago called The Truth About PTSD. And this is one that, for those in the faith community, it's kind of a faith look at post-traumatic stress and combat trauma, but it's again, not a clinical approach to it. There's a lot of great literature and books written on kind of the clinical aspects of post-traumatic stress.
Right.
This is really about how we move forward when we understand that we have struggled through this. Some of what I talked about in my story and others who have walked through this. What are some practical steps you can take right now to begin moving forward? And there are some other great books that I could recommend too, but this is one that we wrote. Again, small. You can read it in 1 or 2 sittings, and it's just intended to help you understand fundamentally that if you struggle with post-traumatic stress, that doesn't mean you're broken. Kind of the Cliff Notes version is the truth about PTSD is that you're not disordered. You may have post-traumatic stress, you may have issues related to trauma, but a person who lives through an abnormal or traumatic experience and then responds to that is not responding in a broken or disordered way. That's completely natural to respond to trauma in your life, and you should. It'd be weird if you didn't. It doesn't make you broken. It doesn't make you disordered, and you can move forward. And so that's what that book is about, The Truth About PTSD. And then this last year, wrote a book. It's just entitled Not the Solution, but it talks about suicide. We know the numbers related to veteran suicide, and the publicly available numbers are not right. I think most of us would agree with that. In fact, a lot of research has been done on veteran suicide. The numbers are very high, also very high in the first responder community. We don't know exactly how high because of reporting issues and all the things around that, but very, very high. And so we wrote another small book. If I'm struggling with thoughts of suicide, or someone that I know is struggling with thoughts of suicide, or I'm a pastor trying to help someone in my church who's struggling with suicide, what do I do? What's the right perspective? How do I understand that? And then what are some practical steps that I can take to walk through that? And so we wrote that book and make all of those available. They're all available for free on our website. You can download those for free. We give out, it's kind of like the worst book deal ever, right? We give them all away for free. We don't really charge anything for them. We've given away tens of thousands of those books. In fact, the Path to Resiliency was the first one that we wrote, the little one on resiliency. The Marine Corps allows us to give that out once a quarter at Marine Corps boot camp. And so we give that out to thousands of Marine recruits every year. We've given that out at military conferences and given it to units really around the world. And so we just want people to have the information they need and the resources they need. And hopefully that will help. But then it can be a stepping stone to the next thing, which is, maybe coming to a program or getting into a community of people that can help them and encourage them as well. And so just trying to get as much out as we possibly can to help people who really need it. Also on our website, those books are there. Also on our website, there are videos. There are, a lot of testimonial stuff, people talking about their own struggles and how they overcame those struggles. A lot of other great content is there. intended to help. It's all free. It's all accessible. And we just want people to be able to plug in. There is hope. And the problem with so many of these issues that we talk about is you feel alone, like I did, like a lot of other people do. And you start to believe you're alone and you're not alone. And so we want to make it possible for people to get, as much input, as much help as they can to get unstuck if they're stuck, to get to the place where they can get the real healing that they need.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. You feel like you're the only one that's going through it. You're the only one that's facing these challenges. And so there must be something wrong because, nobody else is dealing with this. So you bringing that forward and then getting the word out ahead of time before people start dealing with that, like taking those booklets to the boot camps and, getting out ahead of their service, basically, to let them know that once they experience some of these things, they can look for these signs. They know what to be looking for in themselves and in each other, so they can help their friends. They can help say, look, I think you're going through something and you're not broken, but I knew tools to fix it, or I know ways we can engage with, those partners that would help us through that trauma or that experience. So that's really great avenue to go.
That's exactly right. And a lot of people probably who would be listening to this have experienced this to one degree or another, but it really is hopeless when you feel like you're alone. Isolation destroys people, and you start to think, man, I look at everyone else, right? I look at people on social media. I look at people in my community. I look at people around me, and everyone seems like they're doing fine, and I'm not doing fine. Well, kind of the big secret is a lot of them aren't doing fine either, right? And they just do a pretty good job of projecting something else, and so it looks like they're doing okay. They're not doing okay. And so the way that you feel, it's real to you, but it's also not true. And you need to be confronted with truth. You need to be confronted with other people that have had a similar experience to you and struggled in the same way, so that you can take those dark thoughts that are rolling around in your head that are pushing you further and further away from help. You can take those dark thoughts out into the light. And once you start talking about it, and once you start realizing that other people have struggled and other people have hurt, and there is hope, because those same people have also gotten help and put marriages back together and are gainfully employed and doing things that matter and doing things that make them feel good. Once you realize that, man, it changes the game completely. And so, so much of this is just about that. It's about us just helping people realize that you're okay. You're okay. You've been through something. You've seen things. A lot of people, the trauma that they've experienced happened in childhood, and then they took it into the military, and so they've never dealt with it. Unfortunately, that's a part of life, but you can move forward from here. There is hope. And that's the big message that we do our best to communicate.
You're right in that peer-to-peer support is so important, because it's hard to talk to somebody that hasn't been in that space, doesn't understand it, doesn't know the challenges. So having someone to connect with it talks the same language and shares the same experience that you do makes a huge difference. So I love that you're doing that. So if someone wanted to get involved with Mighty Oaks as like someone that's either a supporter, or maybe they want to help the program in their area, what can they do to assist if they're not maybe the ones struggling because they've gotten on the other side of their trauma or their PTSD? How can they connect with you guys?
Yeah, the best way for all things Mighty Oaks related is to just go to the website, mightyoaksprograms.org, mightyoaksprograms.org. You have it on the screen there. That's the very best way. That kind of the first big button you'll see is the button to apply. It talks about our programs and talks about how to apply. We try to make it as simple as possible. There is a place there to sign up for volunteer opportunities. What we do is a little bit unique because we go to places around the country. We bring people there for that week. And so the volunteer opportunities are a little bit different, but there are opportunities. You can find those on our website as well. There's a place to kind of put your name in and say, I'd be willing to help. And then for financial support, as I mentioned, the only way that we're able to do what we do and cover all the costs is because of people who've come along and supported. One of the decisions we made early on was that we wouldn't run a program if we couldn't figure out how to pay for it without asking the student to pay for it. And the reason we did that, and this has been criticized over the years, a lot of people are like, well, they need to pay for what, I get it, but people who need help will often use excuses to not get the help they need. And we didn't want there to be any barrier. And so we do everything we can to make it as simple as possible. And we know that one of the big barriers, and it's a real one, is financial cost. By the time you pay for a program and pay for travel, if you have to go somewhere and all that, it can be very expensive. And so we've worked very hard with wonderful people who support us to make it possible for people to attend. If you're a veteran, a service member, first responder, or spouse, you can attend our program for free. And that's not because it doesn't cost anything. That's because of people across the country who love you and care about you and are giving to support to make that happen. So yeah, mightyoaksprograms.org. That's where you can find all things Mighty Oaks related.
That's awesome. I love that. So what's next for you and what's next for Mighty Oaks? Do you have any new programs coming out, or do you have anything that you're working on personally, another book? What's going on for your next step?
Yeah, the big thing on our Mighty Oaks radar right now, and this is what I kind of alluded to it earlier, but this is what we're working on as a team right now. Last year was the first year. So we started, 2012, and every year we've said, if we could get 1,000 students a year through the program, that'd be amazing. That meets the demand. And this is the number, right? 1,000 is the number. And we've always gotten close. I think COVID set us back a little bit, but we've been close almost every year for the last, 10 years at least. And this last year, 2025, we had almost 1,100 students come through the program. And so that was a big deal for us for a lot of reasons. But one, that basically maxed out all the space that we have. So all of the bed spaces that we have, all of the opportunities we have to attend, that maxed it out. And I've always been under the impression and the belief that once we got there, we'd be hitting, the demand. It's grown organically, but we can do this. And that's the number. Last year, we started to see about mid-year, so June, July, we started to see about 200 new applications a month come in. And that pushed the demand to a place that's well beyond that 1,000. We have right now about 2,000 people waiting to get in. So we're waiting to get space for them, about 2,200 applications a month. So if nothing changed, in about a year, we'd be around 3,000 on our waiting list, which is just not acceptable, obviously. And so we're working through that. That's the big discussion every week for us right now, is how do we scale to reach more people, and what exactly does that look like for us? So we're working through that. We've got some solutions. We've already done some pilot testing, different kind of formats and different things. And so I'm pretty excited about what that will look like by the end of the year. And I think we'll get to the point where we're able to continue to meet the demand as it grows. So that's the big thing. I mentioned to you, I think before we started, that we're building out our headquarters in Texas. And that's exciting as well. That gives us a place to have a studio facility. We do a lot of media, and so that's a place to do that. Offices, our whole team, our whole staff works remote right now. And so that will give everyone a place to actually work, which will be nice. And then we'll have a part of that building will be for programming. So that will increase our ability, our capacity for programming as well. So excited about that. That should happen by the end of the year. It's in the process of being built right now. We should be in by the end of the year. We're kind of on track to do that. So yeah, a lot of good things happening, and a lot of big things happening. And someone asked me the other day, what do you do next? Or what will you do next? Kind of what you asked. And my answer was more of the same, just a lot more of the same. And we just want to do a lot more of the same, and continue to meet the demand and help as many folks as we possibly can.
That's awesome. So if you If you were to give advice for someone that's feeling stuck, that doesn't know where to turn, what to do, I know you go to the website and you sign up, but what if they have
Yeah.
like a problem getting to that point? What would you tell them to encourage them to go ahead and sign up? Because, like you said, there's a waiting list, so they may have to wait for some services through Mighty Oaks. But what would you tell them to
Yeah.
start that journey of healing and kind of hope?
Yeah, well, on the waiting list side, that's true, and it just depends on kind of where you are currently and how critical your need is at the moment as to where you fall on that waiting list. And we got a team that figures that out, but we also have a team that exists completely to help people who've signed up but may not be able to get to a program for a little while to get the resources and connect to other things that they need. And so the first step is to fill out that application, talk to our folks, and then we'll figure out how we can help you right now. Even if that means you're going to have to wait a little while to get physically to a program, we'll do our best to get you whatever else you need to make sure that you are moving forward. But there is a point, and this is what's sometimes frustrating doing what we do. There is a point where I can't make a person sign up. I could not even tell you, and I don't know exactly what the number is. I couldn't tell you how many spouses have signed up their service member to attend our program, right? We don't find out until later. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't work, but you have to at least recognize that where I am is not where I want to be.
Right.
And then also understand that you don't have to be there. There are people, there are organizations, there are places, there are resources available to you if you'll just do something as simple as anonymously, not anonymously, give us your name, but on your own. You don't have to go out in the open. You don't have to talk to anyone in person. Just fill out an application, launch it out, and then we'll take care of it from there. We'll give you a call. We'll talk through that. We'll work through that. You don't need to do anything big. You just need to take that next step, because you don't have to stay where you are. And if you're not going to do it for you, do it for your family. Do it for the people that care about you. Do it for the loved ones that are in your life. Man, I can't make you do it, but I often, ask the question and wonder, why wouldn't you do it? There's an opportunity for you to move forward. There's an opportunity for you to live a productive life. There's an opportunity for you to get out of this hole that you feel like you're stuck in. Why wouldn't you do it? And what could your life look like 6 months, a year, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, if you would? So just take the step, fill out the application. There's no obligation. Just fill it out, and let's start to have a conversation and figure out what needs to happen next.
That's great advice. Is there anything else that I didn't ask you about that you wanted to put out to the group before we get off the podcast tonight?
No, I appreciate it. I love this conversation, and man, these conversations are so important, and I appreciate that you're doing it. People in our world, in our community, need to hear from other people like us who have served and who struggled, and there's something that does give hope in that. And so I really just appreciate you and appreciate you having these conversations. So thank you.
Well, I really appreciate what you're doing, and I think you're really making a difference. 8,000 a year is a big difference in anybody's book, I would say. So just keep doing what you're doing, and if you can support, if you're out in the audience and you can support Mighty Oaks programming, please do. And if you can volunteer time to it and you're in the area, do that as well. So Jeremy, thank you so much for being on tonight. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I really enjoyed learning more about yourself and about Mighty Oaks programming. And so thank you so much for all you do in the veteran community to make a difference.
Yeah. Well, thank you. No, I really appreciate you, and thank you for what you guys are doing.
This is Trace Around signing off.
Life is like a duck. Tough times don't last, but tough people do. Here at Military Broadcast Radio, we're teaming up with our friends at Die Tired, the veteran-friendly music band spreading strength, resilience, and mental health awareness one shirt at a time.
And check this out. Their brand new shirts feature broadcast beaker right on the breast pocket. A reminder that you can weather the storm, and you're never alone.
Shirts are only $25, and proceeds support giving veterans a voice. MBR's mission to teach veterans how to podcast and videocast. Because when our vets are talking, they're not overthinking. They're not second-guessing. Together, we stop the 22 stigma. Grab your shirt today at mbradio.us and hit the shop. Or go directly to toramerch.printavo.com/merch/dietiredband. That's toramerch.printavo.com/merch/dietiredband.
Suit up, stand strong.
Remember, we're unduckable together.
You're built tougher than the storm.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to Military Broadcast Radio. As we wrap up today's show, we want to remind you that the podcast of today's episode will be available right after we go off the air. So if you missed any part of the show or want to listen again, be sure to check it out. And remember, we're here to support and honor our veterans. Your stories and experiences matter, and we are committed to giving you a platform to share them. That's right. We're here to give our veterans a voice. So don't forget to catch the podcast and stay connected with us. Giving our veterans a voice.